Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. In our last episode, Princess Elizabeth became queen, and everyone was very happy about it. It was at this time that Princess Margaret began to fall in love with Peter Townsend. He worked at the palace, and he was a married man at that time. Peter thought that after he got a divorce, he would be able to marry Princess Margaret. He soon found out that it wasn't going to be an easy thing to do. So let's see what's going on today. After the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret got back from Rhodesia, 3 weeks later, after her 53rd birthday, Queen Elizabeth traveled as usual to the Highlands. She stayed at Balmoral first with her children and grandchildren. It was heaven, she said, laughing and talking and being a family, which she thought is the only thing worth living for. Then she moved down the road to Birkhall, and she invited the Salisburys to stay in the extreme discomfort in her tiny house for a week's shooting. Her guests enjoyed it. Lady Salisbury wrote afterwards that Birkhall was the warmest and coziest place in Scotland, both inside and out. Her husband thought the house was delightful, and to be back on the hill without the king was touching. The king had been so much the guiding spirit of the place, one felt that he was still there all the time, watching us and blessing us with his presence. Not long after, her daughter Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went on a 5-month tour of the Commonwealth, and the Queen Mother had new duties to do. She was required for the first time in the new reign to exercise the powers conferred on her by the new Regency Act as Councillor of State. The other councillors were Princess Margaret, the Duke of Gloucester, the Princess Royal, and the Earl of Harwood. Over the ensuing months, she and Princess Margaret held 7 meetings of the Privy Council to carry out the Queen's constitutional duties on her behalf. They also received numerous British ambassadors who kissed hands on appointment to their postings, and newly appointed foreign ambassadors, presenting their letters of credence. She held 6 investitures at Buckingham Palace. She gave audiences to ministers, and on at least 2 occasions she received Winston Churchill. In April 1955, he resigned due to failing health, and Anthony Eaton took over. She had family duties as well as formal duties. The Queen Mother became a mother to Prince Charles and Princess Anne. She took great pleasure in this task. The children were staying with her at Royal Lodge. She took them to Shaw Farm and Windsor Home Park. She gave her daughter an account of how things went on the farm, and she said they climbed on straw bales, they had cat hunt, they looked at the pigs and fed the cows, and she said when they got back home, the children were as fresh as paint, and she was well exercised. She said they have all been so good and talk about you and Philip a lot. She told the Queen how much she missed her and said that she had not seen much of Princess Margaret. This I'm very glad of for her sake, as she's been lunching and dining out a good deal. That Christmas the Queen Mother presided at Sandringham and reported to the Queen that the children had enjoyed themselves galloping down the passage to see the tree and gasping at it with ohs and ahs. Isn't it beautiful? Earlier at Windsor, she enjoyed the servants' ball, where she waltzed with Lord Freyberg. He was the distinguished former Governor-General and Commander-in-Chief of New Zealand, who was now Governor of Windsor Castle. It was very exciting, as it was a dance when balloons descend from the roof, and Lord Freyberg went mad and banged housemaids out of his way and pushed poor old ladies aside in a mad desire for balloons. Prince Charles started lessons with Miss Peebles, and the Queen Mother was indifferent about the formal lessons. His grandmother was determined that he should have fun, and she said that the children were enjoying playing dumb crambo. So I had to look this game up, and it said that this is a guessing game where players act out words that rhyme with a clue word. It's a game similar to charades, and they played that in the evenings. It was a great success, and they endure acting, though the rhyming is slightly vague. And then something to rhyme with stop, and Charles thought of the word pheasant. Triumphantly, that's the way that was played at first, but now they're getting much better at rhyming. Apart from the children, the letters between the mother and daughter dealt with horses. The Queen Mother also sought out advice and encouraged her in her public role, as she herself understood so well. She said to her, "We follow your journeys very well by the papers and some good newsreel," she wrote. "How well one knows the procedure and how monotonous it becomes. But one simply can't think of any other way of letting people see the sovereign than getting up on a dais and driving around town." She hoped that Prince Philip was not tired. It makes just a whole difference in the world doing things together. I find that doing things without Papa nearly kills one. He was so wonderful. She remembered how tired they had both become during their own visit to New Zealand and Australia in 1927, and yet, thank goodness, one is uplifted and carried on by the wonderful loyalty and affection, and one feels again how moving and humble-making that one can be the vehicle through which this love for country can be expressed. Don't you feel that? And the Queen wrote back long letters filled with vivid descriptions of incidents and encounters on their trip, as well as questions and advice about racing horses back home. "Racing is incredible out here," she wrote from New Zealand. "Tremendous enthusiasm is everywhere. They all bet like mad and like their marathons of 8 races at a dose." She also called her mother to tell her how much she liked talking to her, but with the children always poised to snatch the receiver, she often failed to give her all the news. In early March 1954, the Queen wrote from Melbourne expressing her excitement that she would see her children 3 weeks earlier than originally planned. Britannia, the new royal yacht, was sailing to the Mediterranean to pick up the Queen and Prince Philip, and the children would be on board. She was sure they would have changed a lot in the past 6 months, and she was worried that they might not recognize their parents. Her mother reassured her with a gentle hint that it was important to remember what it was like to be 5 or 6 years old. She said, "You may find Charles much older in a very endearing way. He is intensely affectionate and loves you and Philip most tenderly. I'm sure that he'll always be a very loving and enjoyable child to you both." She had taken Princess Anne to the Royal Lodge, where the little girl had amused everyone by singing very loudly and tunelessly. She is very intelligent and very sensitive and very funny. The reunion took place in Tobruk on board the Britannia. The Queen wrote to her mother that the children were enchanting, and it's so wonderful to be with them again. She said when she and Philip came on board, both children gravely offered us their hands, partly, I suppose, because they were somewhat overcome by the fact that we were really there, and partly because they've met so many new people recently. However, the ice broke very quickly, and we've been subjected to very energetic routine and innumerable questions which have left us gasping. On October the 20th, 1954, the Queen Mother began one of the most important journeys of her life. She went to New York on the Queen Elizabeth, which she had launched in 1938 to begin a 3-week tour of the United States and Canada. She dreaded the trip because she wasn't going to be with any member of the family. She felt obliged to go because the centerpiece was to be the presentation of funds raised in memory of the King to be spent on training in the USA of young people from the Commonwealth. The trip was a personal triumph which convinced her that she did have an important part still to play in public life. The outbound passage was rough, but she had always been a good sailor. Once she got there, she had a busy time seeing as much of New York, both formally and informally. As she thought, she found it hard not having any family to laugh with. She kept it hidden, though, and visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art, attended a luncheon given by the Pilgrims, then to the Anglo-American Society, visited the American Bible Society, where she was presented a special edition of the King James Bible. She toured the United Nations headquarters in the company of the then Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld. The program of the day included meeting journalists at the UN, which she commented, "How ghastly." She didn't let her feelings about the press show at all. Indeed, press men and women, a tough crowd, praised her for treating them well. She was a guest of honor at the charter dinner at Columbia University, where she had visited with the King in 1939. She received an honorary degree of Doctor of Laws. A ball was given in her honor by the Associated Commonwealth Societies of New York, and she had a private lunch with Eleanor Roosevelt at Hyde Park, which brought back memories of the 1939 visit. It was a touching reunion of two women who had each contributed enormously to her country's wartime effort, and they had fun too. Then she went to see the popular musical The Pajama Game, loved the tunes, and wished Princess Margaret had been there. She adored the Empire State Building and visited a child's daycare center and a home for aged British men and women. November the 3rd, the mayor of New York gave her luncheon, and that night the English-speaking Union a dinner. It was at this formal occasion that the check honoring the king's memory was presented to her. She found the formal dinners the worst part of the American trip. She hated dining on a dais full of evening dress and tiara, stared at by the world under a terrible glare of television and film lights. Eating in public really is a nightmare, and they give one gigantic bits of meat, bigger than this sheet of paper, practically raw, and then, instead of gravy, they pour a little blood over it. Oh boy. At the English-speaking union dinner, her lady-in-waiting observed that she only toyed with her food, and when she returned to the Dixon house where she was staying, she had a plate of scrambled eggs on a tray, enjoying the informal picnic infinitely more. The Queen Mother went on a shopping expedition to various New York department stores on Friday, October the 29th. It was supposed to be private, but everywhere she went, she was pursued by the packs of relentless British journalists and crowds of excited American women. So I will end the video here. In this episode, the Queen had a busy time when her daughter, the Queen, and her husband, Prince Philip, had to take a 5-month tour of the Commonwealth. The Queen had to deal with the royal business while they were gone, as well as being a substitute mother for Prince Charles and Princess Anne. She enjoyed both her duties. Then she had to take a 3-week tour of the United States and Canada. She didn't look forward to the fact that there was no family member going with her, but she felt a sense of triumph that she still had an important role in public life. It made me feel tired when I saw all the Queen Mother had to do in this episode. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. As I've said before, I created a list of merchandise from Amazon that I thought you might be interested in. If you click on the link, it takes you to the Amazon page. And if you purchase anything, I get a small commission that is of no extra cost to you. But more importantly, I wish everyone a great day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you.